So, last time we talked about this very particular superstar in the NHL, we made a video talking about how he was frustrated with the moves that his team made. Of course, we are talking today about Sid the Kid once again, or maybe Sid the Vet because he's now 35 years old. Not so much of a kid anymore, but Sidney Crosby is today's conversation. Because last time we'd spoke about him, we talked about how he was very disappointed with the Jake Guentzel trade, wherein the Penguins sent away one of their best players for Michael Bunting. There were a few other things involved there too, but essentially the signal that was sent over to the team by the Jake Guentzel trade was that Kyle Dubas and his crew, they wanted to focus on the future. They wanted to build with assets that they could use in the now, like Michael Bunting, but also prioritize building for a time after Crosby, Malkin, Letang. And I was gonna say Carlsson, but no, he expires in forever, so we'll leave him in the conversation for now. But the Penguins are preparing for their after story. That's what the Guentzel trade signaled to the league. And we talked about how Sidney Crosby was frustrated with that. He had a right to be ticked off that, hey, this team is building for an era beyond me. After I'm gone, we have a competitive group of guys here. We can still compete to some level. Maybe we're not as good as we were before, but we still want to try. Me, Malkin, Letang, Carlsson, we've got this group here. We can remain competitive, but because management made this trade, it signals to us that they don't want to prioritize what we have right now. And this was a pretty interesting conversation. It was one that we kind of knew was going to be looming out there in the background ever since Jake Guentzel's name entered the trade rumor mill the past few months. But we had ourselves an update in regards to what Coach Mike Sullivan goes out there and says in regards to Crosby's future with the team. Take a look at this article published on NHLTradeTalk.com by Jim Parsons. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and read this yourself, but Sidney Crosby's personal crossroads could change the extension plans with the Penguins. Now, I will say, this article's title is difficult to read because you got 4 C words in a row. Crosby crossroads could change, and yeah, they're not the same C sounds. The change at the end really changes things up there. But Sidney Crosby is not happy with the Pittsburgh Penguins trade deadline moves. Some wonder if it changes how he negotiates an extension. The article opens up talking about the same things that we have talked about, how there are reports that Crosby is upset with the Penguins. They were already disappointed with the way the season has gone, now they're disappointed in the way Jake Guentzel was traded. Not only does it remove his line mate and buddy, but it signals a throwing in of the white towel on the season. That's something Crosby is never going to be okay with, and this has led to concern that Crosby isn't happy with the Penguins and that it could change his contract extension negotiations. Head coach Mike Sullivan was asked about Crosby's demeanor and his reaction to the trade deadline move, and Mike Sullivan admitted that his star captain is in a tough spot. Now, instead of reading just this quote, we'll go over onto the full tweet posted by Penn's Inside Scoop. It's a really big piece of text here. I think Sid understands the circumstance we're in, and I think his intentions are in the right place as far as trying to do what he can to help his team win. It's been an emotional couple of weeks for all of us, for obvious reasons. No one more so than Sidney Crosby. He cares deeply for this team and this organization and trying to compete. So I think his intentions are certainly in the right place from that standpoint. Obviously, at an emotional time, these are challenging times. I think he's understanding with where we're at, and he understands what his role is here in trying to help us compete and ultimately make the playoffs, acknowledging that we're in a tough spot right now. But it's not insurmountable, and for me, that's the most important thing. Just understanding that we're not eliminated until we're eliminated. We've got to control what we can and do everything within our power to stay competitive and win games. Give ourselves an opportunity to play meaningful hockey. I think Sid understands that, and he wants to lead us in that regard. Now, the first reply goes out there and says, yeah, translation, yeah, our team is terrible and it's eating Sid up that he can't carry us all by himself, but hey, at least we aren't mathematically eliminated yet. It's kind of a, it was weird going through this the first few times reading these comments, but that thing at the end kind of bugs me. Like, yeah, we are in a tough spot, but it's not insurmountable. We're not eliminated just yet, and we've got to keep on playing until we're eliminated. Like, it's very odd the way everything is phrased out here, especially when Sullivan acknowledges that Sidney Crosby is in this spot where he is kind of forced to be as good as he's always been, and he may be frustrated that he can't force wins at the hands of the Pittsburgh Penguins because of it. Like, Crosby can be as good as he can be, and he is very good, but is it enough? Probably not. Going back over onto the article here, it writes further down at the bottom that the belief is that Sidney Crosby has no intention to leave the Penguins and he's not asking for a trade, but there is concern that he's not happy. The expectation seems to be that any slam dunk plan to finish his career with the organization is not a slam dunk any longer. He's not abandoning ship per se, but one insider thinks Crosby may change his contract extension negotiation plans to keep his options open. There was a comment made by Elliotte Friedman debating as to whether or not he gets some sort of a short-term bridge deal in the $10 million range, and there's a conversation to happen there as well as to whether or not that's plausible. But for Sidney Crosby, you really can't help but feel for the guy. Like, sure, he wants to win as much as he can, as often as he can, with the guys that he's won with before. Malkin, Letang, and then, of course, Jake Gensel. Not to mention Erik Carlsson getting tossed in there, too. Veteran presence going out there with some other offensive talents. But with the team just not being as good as they need to be to compete, you could kind of see it in the body language, man. This Penguins team has been struggling, and Sidney Crosby, captain, head of the ship, he's got no choice but to be there through thick and thin. So how much is he going to be willing to deal with that? The article then at the bottom says this: on the surface, all of this conversation about the contract offer and Mike Sullivan's comments, it doesn't really change anything compared to the speculation that was already out there. A short-term deal was already more likely than a long-term one, but some are wondering if Sidney Crosby will leave himself any outs in any new negotiations. He's got plenty of game left and his contract will likely include trade protection, but a shorter-term deal of 3 years makes it easier for any other team to invest in Sidney Crosby in a trade. If he signs too long an extension, it could limit the number of clubs willing to bring him in at $10.5 million, but if he's on a short-term deal, salary retention becomes an option in a couple of years, should the Penguins and Crosby see it as a good time to move on. So, at the end of the day, this is a pretty intriguing conversation because now, with Mike Sullivan's comments out there, kind of ruminating, it pretty much just reinforces the same rhetoric that we've had about Sidney Crosby. Oh, if he signs a short-term deal, it becomes easier to trade him. He probably won't sign a long-term deal. Maybe it is $10.5 million a season. Maybe it's 8.7 again. Who really knows? Maybe he goes with his branding because he's always had 8.7. Everything is 87 in the world of Sidney Crosby. But either way, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as to Mike Sullivan's comments about Sidney Crosby and what this changes in your view as to what's going to happen. Do you think there is some bearing as to the progression of Sidney Crosby's career here? He was already unhappy. He didn't like the trade. Now the direction of the team has gone down the gutter even more because they're still losing games. And what, Michael Bunting is supposed to come in here and save everything? No, it's not Bunting, it's Bunting and the prospects. And all those prospects, hey, unfortunately, they're not here with the team right now. They have to wait a few years before they will actually have an impact. And by that time, who knows if Crosby is still going to be good. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Sidney Crosby's future with Pittsburgh, Mike Sullivan's comments. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and read the rest of the article on NHL Trade Talk. It does go over a few interesting other things, like the Elliotte Friedman contract proposal and everything in between. So lots of conversations going on with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but for now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.